Yo, what's up? My name's Patrouski, and I've been playing PokeMMO for around 9 years or so. I started playing back in 2013, so it's been a while since it was my first time playing PokeMMO. And I've been thinking all about tips and tricks for new players, and I'm always trying to welcome new players into the game and give them the best experience possible, and I think this video might be able to help do so. Today, I wanted to make a video talking about the 10 things that I wish I knew before or slash when I started playing PokeMMO for the first time. This list includes a ton of things from Pokemon to get, items to get, things to understand, mechanics, etc, etc. So hopefully there's at least one thing you guys haven't heard of before watching this video. If you guys do find yourself enjoying today's content, do make sure to leave a like on the video to let me know and subscribe to the channel for daily PokeMMO content. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the list. Alright, the first thing I wish I knew was to try to save as much of my Pokeyen, TMs, and items during the storyline as possible. Now, there's nothing wrong, there's no shame in needing to use certain powerful items or healing items to complete the storyline. The PokeMMO storyline is pretty tough, I'm not gonna lie. Even sometimes I have trouble myself getting through, and sometimes I need to abuse certain mechanics that we'll talk about throughout this list. But really, it is important to try to save as much Pokeyen and TMs items in a storyline in PokeMMO as much as possible, because you don't really realize or think about, obviously this is an MMO. In the single player or traditional Pokemon games, you can blow all of your Pokeyen down to $0 and rebuild, and it doesn't really matter, right? As long as you can buy some potions and have some Pokeballs, you're fine. But in PokeMMO, you really do want to have access to that capital or that excess amount of Pokeyen, or just money in general. If you're used to any other MMO or playing on any other MMO, you'll usually understand this. Just to have that ability, the capabilities to buy something is really important. It's a power to have access to tools and resources, especially once you get your 4th gym badge and have access to the GTL, which is essentially the auction house. It's called the Global Trade Link in PokeMMO if you aren't familiar. It acts as the auction house. There's tons of Pokemon and items all to your disposal here once you defeat the 4th gym. Alright, the second thing I want to talk about is about the power of setup moves and X items. These things are incredible for helping you beat through the PokeMMO storyline, and they're a lot of fun in PvP if you like that sort of thing. Now, one of the ones I like to talk about the most is Shell Smash on Blastoise, because Blastoise becomes, in my opinion, the best starter in Kanto in PokeMMO because of this move solely. Shell Smash is just so powerful. Raising both, if you don't know, it raises your attack and special attack and speed. So raising both of your attack stats plus your speed by 2 stages, it sharply raises them. It does also lower your defense and special defense, but usually in storylines that doesn't matter. You're able to essentially lead Blastoise against any sort of gym leader or any sort of Elite 4 member and just set up a Shell Smash, and as long as he survives, you're going to be able to sweep through and pretty much clear any part of the storyline you possibly could ever need to. It's also important to note that he does learn Shell Smash at level 35, so that's honestly pretty quickly if you ask me. I think, yeah, level 35 or so. So yeah, it's technically before he even becomes a Blastoise. You'll get it as he's still a War Turtle, which is, I don't know, really cool. It's pretty quickly learned. Now let's quickly touch on X items. X items are a lot less good, I do want to say for sure, but X items can be super powerful in things like, if you're doing like a Nuzlocke run or something, especially. Certain Pokemon don't always have access to setup moves. They don't have access to Swords Dance, Nasty Plot, Shell Smash, whatever it may be. They don't have access to those moves, Hone Claws, etc. So being able to essentially just not have to have the move on your Pokemon, that's what you're paying the Pokeyen for, right? Most X items cost around 2K. Some of them are a little higher, a little more, 2,500, 1,500, etc., etc. But you want to avoid X items if possible, just because, you're paying 2K for an X item. X items raise a stat by 2 stages, is essentially the way to think about it. The same thing as an X attack is the same thing as a Sword Stance. That's the way to think about it. An X special attack is the same thing as a Nasty Plot, but they do cost like 2K a piece, and they do take the turn. So if you have access to Nasty Plot or Sword Stance, those are obviously just better, since you don't have to waste the Pokeyen. But obviously, if you don't have any other options, or if it's Pokemon, if you want to have the 4 move slots, if you have like Kingdra and you want to have like Rain Dance, Surf, Ice Beam, and like a Dragon move like Draco Meteor or something of the sort, it's nice to be able to have that X special in your bag and have the option of using it. Alright, the third thing that I want to talk about is that you actually can de-EV Pokemon in PokeMMO. So let's go ahead and talk about that. If you don't know, EVs are essentially hidden stats that whenever you defeat a Pokemon, let's go ahead and check the Pokedex for example. Whenever you defeat a Pokemon, you gain a certain stat in a specific stat. So if you defeat a Marl, you gain +2 HP EVs, and 4 EVs equal 1 stat. The EV page looks like this if you aren't familiar. Now when you're playing through the storyline, you don't really get to target these EVs because you're battling all these different trainers, all these different Pokemon, etc, etc. But when you're building a competitive Pokemon or like a really targeted specific Pokemon, you want your EVs to be very clean, like this Breloom is. You can see you want this sort of Pokemon, not this sort of Pokemon. But when you're playing the storyline, this sort of Pokemon is inevitable. There's not really much you can do about that. So sometimes after the storyline is over, if you have a Pokemon that has really good IVs and a really good nature that you can reuse or recycle in competitive play, you might actually want to buy berries to de-EV it. I'll be putting the berries listed here in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Those are all of the berries' names. The stats are there, what they lower, and one berry, they usually cost around 1k each, maybe like 1200 or so. So it's usually around 1k per 10 EVs you want to get rid of, so it's not cheap. I will say it's not, like, I guess it's not crazy expensive either. Like de-EVing this Smeargle, let's say I wanted to make this Smeargle 252 attack and 252 speed. To get rid of all of the random EVs here, it's going to cost me somewhere around 260k, maybe a little more for the extra little hang EVs over the stats, over the, you know, increments of 10, but it is possible. I don't want you guys to like hold on to a Pokemon and like be in fear of using a Pokemon with good IVs and good nature in the storyline because you want to keep the EVs perfect for once you're done and for late game. I did that a ton. I remember like having really good Pokemon that I was afraid to use because I didn't want to mess them up or ruin them, right? So you can do that. Don't be afraid of that. It's honestly worth paying a lot of the times. And then usually at the end of the story, you know, after the storyline, if you want a competitive Pokemon, you usually just end up finding something better than what you found in the storyline anyway. But there is that option. So don't be stressed out, you know, fearing not using a good Pokemon. Alright, the fourth thing that I wish I knew before I started playing PokeMMO was how important nature was and how much more important nature was than IVs most of the time. Now, obviously both are important, but nature making a 10% increase of difference in stat matters so much more and impacts the stats so much more than a 31 IV or a high IV ever would. If I showed you these two Cranidos, this one with a neutral nature at a 30 attack IV and this one with 8 attack IV but adamant nature, which one do you think you would use in PvP or just the storyline, or which one do you think you would use and which one do you think does more damage? I'm really curious. If you were to train both of these Cranidos up to level 50, EV train them and use them in PvP or use them at all, this Cranidos, the one with 8 attack IV and adamant nature, would do marginally more damage. He would actually do 5% more damage on each roll with head smash. If you took the extreme, if you took this Cranidos, leveled him up into a Rampardos, you know, made both these guys competitive Rampardos, right? If you took his attack IV to 0, he would still do 3% more damage even if this one had 31 attack IV. So a 31 attack IV versus a 0 attack IV, but adamant nature, competitive Rampardos at level 50 does 3% more damage on every single or each roll with head smash at level 50, which is pretty insane. It's pretty insane that like the difference is so insane. Obviously this is a very huge example as well because it goes into the stat difference, whereas Cranidos' like base attack is really high, right? It's the highest, like, you know, of any Pokemon essentially, at least non-legendary, I believe. The highest in Pokemon, I'm pretty sure. So it's a pretty extreme example, but it's really interesting how 0 attack IV with the correct nature literally does more damage than the 31 attack IV with a neutral nature. It's really important to understand that natures impact things a ton. 10% is huge. I do have another video actually showing my calculations, talking about some Scrafties, so I'll try to remember to link that down below, but if you don't see the link down below, remind me politely in the comments. Alright, the fifth thing I want to say is don't be afraid to use the GTL. PokeMMO is a multiplayer game. It's not single player like other Pokemon games, obviously, right? So you want to take every advantage you possibly can. If you can buy a cheap 2x31 or a cheap Pokemon with good IVs and a good nature and good stats to help you beat through the storyline, don't be afraid to do that. It's super important to take advantage of that. Now, obviously, you do have to have at least 4 gym badges in your first region to be able to access the GTL, but I think it's a really important thing. I think a lot of players shy away from it. They don't want to get a bad deal or don't want to, spend too much money or etc, but it's a totally good thing to go ahead and head to the GTL, check out prices. You're going to make some mistakes here and there, but that's the only way you're going to learn. So don't be afraid to use the GTL, especially when you're early on. You probably don't really care too much about wasting money for the most part. You want to make those mistakes early on rather than later when you have, larger sums of money. So there's more room for error and more, I guess, graver mistakes to make, right? So go ahead, use the GTL, buy some items, see what works, see what items are cheap on the GTL, see which are more expensive in the shops, etc. Always make sure to, when you look at items on the GTL, check like how much it would sell for in a shop, for example. So we can actually go ahead and check Carbos and see that this Carbos is listed at 3,700 Pokeyen. We can actually buy it from a shop at 3,650. You can see that in that little white box. If you see when it says price 36.50, that means you can buy it in a Pokemart for 36.50 somewhere, and you can sell it to a shop for 18.25. So that's some important information to check if you are browsing for items. All right, the 6th thing that I want to talk about is price checking. Price checking is actually a lot easier than you would think to learn, and it's just an absolutely crucial skill to learn in PokeMMO. So I'm going to go through a very simple, quick one, but I do have a very in-depth guide called the Ultimate Price Checking Guide to PokeMMO, and that guide should literally help you price check any Pokemon. Understanding what Pokemon sell for, how to sell Pokemon, what people are buying them for, etc, is crucial to making money in PokeMMO. So many of the best moneymakers in PokeMMO are catching Pokemon and selling them for good IVs. They really wanted to base the economy around that typical gameplay loop of catching Pokemon. But as a very simple, quick overview, the best way to price check something is usually to reverse search its relevant IVs. So you want to act like you're almost searching for the price of the Pokemon you have. Let's say that I have a Hoppip with 31 attack. Now, not many people are gonna want to buy a Hoppip. Jumpluff isn't a very relevant PvP Pokemon, so what I recommend doing is checking the egg group. I would go over to the egg group, see that it is Fairy Plant, and the things I would input are the 31 attack IV. It might have some other stats, but those don't really matter. What matters the most is the 31 attack IV. I'm gonna go ahead and go over to Fairy. I'm gonna sort by lowest price and check the prices, see what we have. So it seems pretty cheap, 3K. Now let's check the other egg group. It was also in the Plant egg group. Let's check that. Also around 3K. So a really cheap price check here. Now, if my Hoppip happens to be male, let's go ahead and price check that, because that would actually impact the price a ton. As you can see, males are selling for 8K. The reason being is that the female decides the species in a breed. So when a Pokemon is male, it means it's not going to come out as that Pokemon. Not many people want Hoppip. So when you sell a male Hoppip, people are taking that Hoppip and breeding it with something like a female Chansey or a more desired Pokemon in that same age group. So keep that in mind. Here's all the male prices. There's a huge difference there. You can see 3K for the females and 8K for the males. Really important to understand why someone is buying your Pokemon and how to price check like that. Once again, there should be an ultimate in-depth price checking guide linked in the description below. Alright, thing number 7 is to check the IVs of every single Pokemon you catch and label them. Every time I catch a Pokemon or interact with a Pokemon that comes into my possession, I always check the IVs and I label it either 1 times 31, 2 times 31, 3 times 31, etc. for the IVs. Sometimes I'll put noted, which essentially means like 20 plus in multiple stats to make it worth something. Sometimes I'll put 1 times 31 plus nat, which means nature. You can do your own sort of labeling system, but this is essentially usually how I do mine, and this is a fantastic thing to do during the storyline, because usually during the storyline, you're not really going to worry about sorting through your boxes too much. You're not going to sell your Pokemon. You don't need to worry about that too much. You're just going to be catching a ton of Pokemon, progressing a ton, leveling a ton, getting to the next gyms, getting gym badges, and making that base progress. You don't want to mess around with your Pokemon too much. So then what happens is you might come back to finally sort through your boxes at the end of a storyline, and you'll have like 3 boxes of caught Pokemon. And when you sort them like this, you're able to just sort through and see, okay, like 1 times 31, oh, here's all the Pokemon that are, I can pull aside and sell, and then I can go ahead and like essentially shift click. You can do this here. You can hold shift and you can mass select, and then you can release or, you know, move or do whatever you need to all of the other bulk Pokemon you might have. Not every Pokemon is worth keeping, and keeping your boxes sorted is super, super important, especially the longer you play the game, the more you realize how much you quickly run out of box space when you want to keep every competitive Pokemon, keep every shiny, keep every meaningful event Pokemon, etc., etc. Alright, the next thing I want to talk about, number 8, I believe. Yeah, number 8 is abusing trade evolutions. One of the most powerful things in PokeMMO, and one of the most fun things, in my opinion, is that you can abuse trade evolutions really easily when you're in an MMO environment. When you're in an MMO, you can just right-click someone and trade, right? I think that is, like, it's such an underrated thing. It allows you to get Pokemon with better stats a lot easier. You can see my Kadabra go here from essentially, we can watch the base stat, you know, change or transformation. You know, 120 base special attack getting switched up to 135 is a big deal. Or, you know, all the other stats, like easily raising stats to be able to help you throughout the storyline, and just adding that excess power essentially for free is incredible. And I love this so much because many of us as kids, you know, if you played the traditional games growing up, we didn't have this option. How many of you grew up with like Pokemon Fire Red or you know, original Red and Blue, and had that Haunter, that Kadabra, that Graveler that you could never evolve into Golem, Alakazam, Gengar? Like, that was one of the saddest things I remember growing up, was that so many people's favorite Pokemon was Gengar, and they couldn't even access it in the game, which is just terribly, terribly sad. And PokeMMO might be the easiest game to acquire trade evolutions, and I love that. It helps you in the storyline, it helps you statistically, and it's just fun. Definitely try to check that out and abuse that. It's also super important to note that if you don't have any friends that play PokeMMO, or don't necessarily know someone you trust who plays PokeMMO, you can actually head on over to global chat in game, and you can find someone with the CM tag next to their game. That'll stand out. I don't know if I'll be able to find someone in chat just, you know, on the whim while recording for a video, but you might find someone with a huge, like, big, it'll stand out. It's not this CN, that means just their language, but it'll say CM, and that means community manager, and you can message them or whisper them and say, hey, like, if you have the time, could you please help me trade evolution this Pokemon? And be nice. You know, obviously they're taking the time out of their day just to come help trade evolution you. But it's really nice. Most community managers will come and help you if they have the time, obviously. If they're not like in the middle of a PvP battle or something, or moderating something, they'll come help you. They'll come to help you trade Evo. You know, they understand, and they're very, very polite, and obviously you can trust them. They're part of the staff. Alright, now number 9 is probably something you wouldn't expect, but it's pretty specific to PokeMMO, like most of these are, but I think it's something that a lot of people miss, and it's honestly to not over-rely on your starter. Now, this is more important in PokeMMO more than any Pokemon game for a couple of reasons. Obviously, because you want to have a well-built team and good coverage, because the storyline's decently difficult. The trainers are a lot more powerful with better Pokemon, better movesets, 6x31 IVs across all stats, as well as smarter AI. But what really hurts the starter Pokemon in PokeMMO is that nowadays, I believe in 2017 or so, 2016, they made a change. This wasn't the case pre like 2016 or so. Every starter Pokemon or every gift Pokemon in game, which is a Pokemon you get like via trade and stuff like that, via NPCs, has 15 IVs across the board, as well as a neutral nature. This makes it really tough to like sort of take advantage of that Pokemon's, I guess, beneficial stats, right? Like having a higher special attack stat, or having a higher stat, or having a nature that helped, would make these Pokemon so much stronger. But the fact that they're so neutral, it makes things more balanced. It makes it so the PokeMMO devs are able to balance out the storylines and balance out the content around this, so that someone doesn't end up with a, you know, a 0 IV terrible nature Pokemon and then just get like absolute, like, you know, they can't even use it at all. They have to like you know, not have a starter essentially. That would suck, right? They would just get obliterated. They have to do this for balancing reasons, and I love this for the purpose of Nuzlocke, honestly, is that you don't have to like make multiple accounts and relog for Nuzlocke. That'd be terrible. But starters are the most average thing by definition, right? By definition, starters are extremely average in PokeMMO. Now, obviously, things like setup moves, things like Shell Smash, they get around this and they can still aid in this, but generally, you don't want to over rely on your starter. It's really hard in PokeMMO to like literally just run through the entire game with one starter. It's really truly difficult to do this, especially with the level cap. The level cap is pretty strict in PokeMMO, I'd say. They obviously let you over level the gyms, but not by too much, and it's usually still quite difficult with the matchups and everything. But yeah, just keep in mind, don't rely too heavily on your starter. You do want to catch some other Pokemon. This was something that I had to get used to, because I definitely was that kid who just over leveled my Blastoise to oblivion and just swept through the storyline easily, but PokeMMO will not allow that. Alright, now the final point is a niche one that is not going to apply to most people, because it's going to involve shiny Pokemon. And I want to quickly say that, in my opinion, and I have a full video explaining why, a full, I guess, video essay. In my opinion, it is never worth to sell your OT shiny. What I mean by OT is, I mean a shiny that was caught by you. Shinies in PokeMMO are extremely rare. If you don't know, they're 1 out of 30,000. That's the shiny rate in PokeMMO, which obviously sounds rare, but I don't think people understand how rare they are until they actually go and encounter 30,000 Pokemon, or, do a full hunt and really realize. I can't tell you the amount of people who have gotten very lucky and encountered a shiny Pokemon during their storylines. Most people should not and will not encounter a shiny during their storyline. Me and my stream actually counted out a while back, and you'll end up getting around 2,000 Pokemon encounters per storyline on average, and that's pretty high. It's even like slightly above average. That's if you're doing hordes and using Sweet Scent to summon hordes to level your Pokemon and stuff like that. So around 2,000 encounters per storyline. That ends up being around 8,000 encounters to complete all the 4 storylines that are currently implemented in PokeMMO. Imagine doing all 4 storylines, only getting 8,000 encounters. It takes a long time. That might take you like 50 to 100 hours to complete those storylines. It's up depending on, how fast you are. Maybe shorter if you're really fast, right? You could probably speedrun in like 20 hours or something. Maybe even less if you're very good. But imagine, spending that much time, and you have this time investment of, hey, I've played this game for 100 hours. Where's my shiny? What the heck? But in reality, it doesn't matter how long you've played. What matters is the amount of encounters that you have. And if you only have 8,000 encounters when the shiny rate's 1 out of 30k, you're not even close. You're not even close to a shiny. And I think there's a lot of entitlement that gets built up, or people get very lucky. What happens is people play through the 4 storylines, they get lucky, they do find a shiny within like 6,000 encounters, and they think, I earned that. I clearly played for like 100 hours, which, it makes sense. I get it, but it's important to not get caught into that mentality. Don't get entitled for a shiny. They're extremely rare. They're tough to get, and I can't tell you the amount of people who have encountered a shiny throughout the storylines, gotten lucky, sold it, and then go on to try to hunt after they sell it because they think, I'm new, I have so little Pokeyen, it's good starting cash. Don't do this. It's so much easier to make starting cash than selling your Pokemon. And I go this in a lot more detail in my video essay, but from a logical perspective, it's not financially worth to sell a shiny 99% of the time. Obviously from an emotional perspective, I think the attachment to an OT is obviously a lot more valuable than the money, but that's obviously like a wishy-washy argument. You want to have a logical and an emotional argument, which I do present in that video. So check that out if you want to see more about that. But yeah, that wraps it up. That is number 10. So if this video helped you guys today, make sure to leave a like on it, subscribe to the channel, helps out a ton. Also, check out my streams. I talked about my streams for a second there. I do stream Monday through Thursday here on YouTube, 12 p.m. Eastern usually, so 12 p.m. ET. Around noon, like lunchtime. I do try to stream at different time zones here and there to try to catch different, crowds of people and give everybody a chance to hang out. We usually just play some PokeMMO, hang out. I answer a lot of questions. It's a good chance for you guys to talk to me and just say what's up, and me to talk to you guys and just say, hey, how you guys doing? What are you guys doing in PokeMMO? What shinies are you hunting, etc., etc. But check the stream out. Discord is linked down below if you want a really cool community to hang out with in PokeMMO. And then finally, if you want to go above and beyond and support the channel, you can do so via YouTube memberships, Twitch Primes, Twitch subs, all that stuff linked down below. Most importantly, PayPal and Venmo do help out the most, just because they take less of a cut. Or you can come wave to me on stream. I'll see you guys later. Have a fantastic day. Peace. Hey, thanks for watching till the end of the video. I really appreciate it. And if your name is on here, I appreciate you even a little more. Thank you so much to everyone who goes above and beyond and supports the channel financially. It allows me to do what I do and just focus on making the best PokeMMO content possible. So thank you so much. Have a great day. I'll see you later. Peace.